Though I use expressions of diversity, the reality is non-dual. All these comings and goings, creation and dissolution, are non-different from the self. The self is the very nature of the totality of existence, even as hardness is a characteristic of a rock, and liquid the nature of waves. The characteristic of something is the reality of something. We only know things through their characteristics. And here the characteristic of existence is taken as the self. One of the things we can ask ourselves is how we relate to existence. What is the tone? What is our characteristic tone when we think of the world, when we think of existence? If you're a spiritual practitioner, then that tone is the self, the realization of the self. This can be understood in many different ways, or felt in many different ways. And one of them is simply as a sense of presence. The self is the quiet intelligence which is here in every moment. Part of spiritual practice is this awareness of self in every moment. Every moment is an opportunity for practice. Are we indulging in our usual habits, or are we seeing it as an opportunity to be turned to the Absolute? He who sees the self in all, and all in the self, and he who sees that the self is non-doer, being non-dual, he sees the truth. The self is simply being the self. It's not doing anything, although everything is happening within it. But this is spiritual practice, seeing the self in all, seeing everything as a manifestation of the self. If you practice this, if you do this, you might find it easier at some moments than at others. There may be some areas where you must reject this as, well, this can't be the self. This can't be the self. This is the cutting edge of our practice. There are things which will upset us, things which will cause us outrage even, things that we will reject. On a political level, on a social level, that's fine. We can reject things. But on a spiritual level, everything must be accepted. The context we've got this teaching in is one which causes outrage, to me anyway. It might not cause outrage to others, although maybe what I'm saying will cause outrage. And that is using the teachings of self-inquiry to justify killing. On a social level, on a political level, we should never justify any action in terms of religion or spiritual teachings. If the fighting is about territory, if it's about possessions, then that's okay. We can discuss it in these terms on a political level or on a social level. But spiritual teachings should never be used to justify killing. Otherwise we're in the territory of the psychotically deranged. So this is an outrage that in this section the teachings of self-inquiry are being used to justify killing. On a social and political level, these must be completely rejected. But on a spiritual level, they have to be taken on board. They have to be used as an opportunity to extend our spiritual practice, to deepen it. This is what I've had to do. I was going to miss out this whole passage, this whole section, which has been lifted from the Bhagavad Gita. But the challenge for me is to focus on the spiritual aspects. Just as gold is the reality in all the ornaments made of gold, whatever be their shape and size, just as water is the reality in all the waves and ripples on the ocean, whatever be their shape or size, even so the Supreme Self, or the infinite consciousness alone is the reality, in what appears to be a world of diverse creatures, and a world of diverse values. Water and waves are often used as examples of the relationship of the self to the apparent diversity that appears on its surface. Water is an interesting thing, isn't it? We need water for life. But water can also cause death. A lot of bacteria are born by water. Fatal diseases can be transmitted through water. Water causes devastation in the form of storms, tidal waves, tsunamis. So water, which is the ultimate life giver, without which life is impossible, also takes life away. So there's food for thought. But we have to understand it all as water. It's all homogeneous. It's just water. Why then do you vainly grieve? What is there in all these changing phenomena that your heart should be devoted to? So this question's been addressed to Arjuna, who's about to go to battle and is grieving over the fact that he's about to kill his relatives. But this question is often asked in the Yoga Vasishta: why do you vainly grieve? Because we are attached to our notions, our beliefs. We're emotionally attached to our convictions. We need to be able to let go of them all. Realize the self in all. In realizing the self in all, then we have to let go of some very deeply felt beliefs and convictions, not only to do with the world, but to do with our relationships in the world. We need to examine them all. Thus, questioning themselves, the liberated ones roam this world in total freedom and in perfect equilibrium. Their desires having turned back on themselves, their delusion having been shed, unattached to anything, but firmly established in self-knowledge, freed from all sense of duality, known as happiness and unhappiness, the sages reach the supreme state. This is an interesting way of expressing it. Their desires having turned back on themselves. Desires turn to themselves. So the very thing that is desiring turns back on the desiring. In this way you can find the self.